Good evening, and welcome to the Oaklander. I'm your host, Al DiGiacomo. The summer of 1996 is going to be a hot one, and I'm not talking about the New Jersey weather during the summer months. I'm talking about the Ramapo Mountain Folk Festival. It's the first of its kind to be held right here in Oakland on Sunday, August 18th. And to give us all the details of what sounds to be a real happening in our town is one of the organizers of this event. And he is well known by many in town. With us is George Gurney. Welcome to the Oaklander, George.
How you doing, Al? Nice to be here.
Very good. Now, you and your wife, Marianne, are responsible for the first night happenings also in town, correct?
She's the chairperson, and I've been the entertainment director for 2 years now, and somehow I'm doing it for a third.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. This sounds like a major event. Can you tell us who will be appearing at the Ramapo Mountain Folk Festival?
Sure. We've got some people who go back to the 60s who are very, very experienced and go way back. Arlo Guthrie, Roger McGuinn, who's been the lead singer and head songwriter of the Byrds, Melanie, who made her claim to fame at Woodstock, the first Woodstock, and she's been at the reunions also. And then we have some of the newer crop of folk acoustic musicians. We have a fellow, Richard Schindel, who's been at both of our first nights, and he's just, each year he keeps getting bigger and bigger. And we have a group from Virginia, but they're called Eddie from Ohio. We can get into that later. And another young lady coming with her band, Jonathan Brooke and The Story. And they just excellent harmonies, and all the acts that we have are just fantastic. So everybody's going to have a great time with what we have here for them.
Will they all be bringing their bands, or are they solo
Some
acts,
solo,
or?
some. Eddie from Ohio is a band, Jonathan Brooke and The Story, they're a complete band, and Arlo Guthrie now plays with his son Abe. They do a little keyboard and guitar interplay there.
That was my next question for some of our viewers who are not familiar with the type of music known as folk music from the 60s. What type of music? Are they going to be playing their older stuff, or will they be mixing it in with a mixture of the new? And
well, the older people that we have maintained a degree of, they're pretty contemporary in that they'll mix in. They're not going to disappoint anybody who comes to hear their hits, but they still all record and put out albums and tour, constantly. So they've got, Arlo Guthrie just released an album in the spring. Melanie has a new album coming out. So it's a mix of new and old with those people in there. So
Arlo's wonderful. I may have seen maybe half of the acts that you're having here, and they're all wonderful. I also understand that you'll have a children's stage for the youngsters, and what kind of entertainment will be there for them?
A mixture of things, sort of what people have come to expect seeing our first night things with, some jugglers, magicians, animal things, stuff like that. We'll have some face painting for the kids. They love that. So it'll work out.
We're hoping that more folks that have not attended the first nights here in town, so we want to make sure that that the people who have not been through a first night will be knowing what's going to be happening. The first night has been a wonderful collage for 2 years of all sorts of acts, hasn't it?
It has, and last year we had, I think, 19 different areas where we had performances going on, and each year we've had a little over 2,000 people, give or take. And when you think of the size of Oakland, that's like almost 20% of your population,
Sure.
Which is, I think a great number, and shows the support that we have in this town. And we've had support from the businesses in town to keep this going. But basically, this event is going to be a fundraiser for first night, because after last year's first night, about a week later, we looked around and saw 30 inches of that white stuff on the ground and said, boy, if that came a week earlier,
Yeah.
It would have just been devastating for performers to try to get here. Eventually we're going to get hit with bad weather on the first night. We have no idea, exactly what's going to happen, how many people can still show up. I'm sure something of the event will go on, but we don't really know how much. So we don't run that as a profit-making thing. We run that on a break-even basis. And it stands to have a big loss sometimes. So we've started the Ramapo Mountain Folk Festival as a way of getting funds into the coffers to better First Night and to ensure us that we can put it on when we have that tragedy hit of that 30 inches of snow on December 30th.
Right. Is that how the idea came about to have a festival?
Yes, it is. Yeah, we wanted a way to make sure that we could get the budget in line for First Night so that we don't have to go out and browbeat the local businesses to contribute and everything. And we keep that First Night ticket at a very low price for an evening's entertainment. $10 for an evening's entertainment on New Year's Eve is, you know, ridiculously low, and we want to keep it at that. So we have to find ways to do that, and this is, you know, the best thing that we've come up with yet, because we, you know, First Night is putting on a great day of entertainment for people, and this is going to be a great day of entertainment for people at the Folk Festival.
Well, I'm sold on it.
We're going to start at noon, and we'll go through to about 8 o'clock in the evening, and we'll have continuous entertainment, continuous children's stage. We'll have all sorts of food and beverages, so, you know, people won't be sitting there for 8 hours and getting hungry.
That's right. This is an all-day affair. What types of food and drinks will be available?
The usual burgers and hot dogs, and plus some, you know, a little more. When you get to a folk festival, you get these people who, you know, like vegetarian food. Will have that. I was at one down in South Jersey a couple weeks ago, and the longest line was at the gourmet coffee. So times have changed from the original days when I first went up to the Newport Folk Festival.
Well, will we have gourmet coffee?
Yes, we will have gourmet
Wonderful.
coffee.
Wonderful. How and where can the tickets be obtained? Will there be a maximum capacity to the event?
Well, we don't feel we can get more than 5,000 people down there, and we would love to have that many. I mean, that's about how many people come down for the fireworks, so that's what we're gauging that by. You know, our 4th of July fireworks gets around 5,000 people, so that's what we've ruled to sell out here. And if we get to that number, that would be fine and dandy with all of us.
And where will the tickets, where can they be obtained?
They can be obtained through the mail and or over the phone. We have an 800 number that people can call.
May I give that number now? Okay, the number for the tickets for the Rocky Mountain Ramapo Mountain Folk Festival will be 1-800-822-9075, and people can call during the day.
Right, or they can also write. There's flyers up and out around town and posters, and our post office box number is box 1695, the same as it is for First Night.
Okay.
And
what will the people who come down to this event, what are they going to need to bring? This is a general admission.
It's general admission. It's what they call festival seating, in which you know, we've got a huge recreation complex down there, and basically the way the stage is going to be set up, people will be sitting facing the mountains, so they'll have a gorgeous view of the Ramapo Mountains.
Wonderful.
And while they're looking at the stage, and they can just bring their blankets, they can bring their portable chairs, whatever's going to make them comfortable in there, and they can stake out their own little area. First come, first served. So if you get here, gates will open around 10:30 in the morning, so the first people in will get the choice seating, but it's all unobstructed view of the stage. We've got great sight lines there, so nobody's going to not be able to see or hear what's going on.
I understand that they bring their own band shell in. Is this a fact?
We'll have a stage constructed. We'll have 2 stages. One will be the small one on the other side. People who know the rec field will know what I mean by Field 7, but that's down by the little recreation building.
Where we have the Oakland picnic.
Yes, and that will be the children's stage that way, and down underneath what was the old recreation stand, that area there, so that people will be looking up at the mountain. That's where the big stage will be, the main stage.
Now, 5,000 people consist of a lot of vehicles. What plans have been made to accommodate that kind of traffic and getting the people to the event?
Well, we know that a lot of people in Oakland, you know, who are from the area themselves, will get themselves there by foot. They're not going to want to deal with traffic congestion, but pretty much we're going to start out with the Valley School lots, and when those are filled, we have off-site parking down at the industrial park, and we have busing to bring the people back. And it's very well coordinated. Lieutenant Bob Hammerly has done a remarkable job at getting the logistics of the situation and the traffic flow and how many buses we need, what hours, and we don't anticipate many problems with that at all. And then they'll just bring the people right back to the gate, and they can show their tickets or purchase their tickets. If we're not a sellout before the day of the event, we'll have tickets for sale at the event, and they can go in and enjoy themselves. 8 hours of great music.
Quickly, in the remaining moments, in the
Sure.
result of a thunderstorm, I understand that the safety committee has made accommodations to get people into one of the schools.
Yeah, it's a rain or shine event because the stage will be covered and people, there won't be electrical problems or anything like that. And even if you have a brief shower in August, did we mention that it's August 18th, by the way?
August
It is
18th.
August 18th, it's Sunday afternoon. That's not going to scare anybody away, anything like that. But in case we have a real torrential downpour or lightning or whatever, we have made arrangements to have the use of the Valley School gym and cafeteria to get people into shelter as quickly as possible. And that'll all be handled very orderly too. We have people coming down from the county, and the fire department is working with us. First aid squad is working with us. The DPW for cleanup. Everybody in town has just been great about this. We're looking forward to having as many people as we can have a great time, and hopefully turn it into an annual event.
Great. In closing, George, is there anything else that our viewers may need to know about the Ramapo Mountain Folk Festival?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. Just come on down and have a good time, all of you.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Okay, thanks a lot for the opportunity to be here, Al.
It was our pleasure. George Gurney is one of the many people organizing the Ramapo Mountain Folk Festival on Sunday, August 18th from noon to 8 p.m. at the Oakland Rec Field. The event will be held rain or shine, and we hope to see a wonderful turnout for this event. So tell your friends, and a splendid time is guaranteed for all. Thanks for being our guest on the Oaklander, George.
Quite welcome.
And we'll see you down there.
All righty.
And we will return after these words.
Good afternoon, officer. My license and registration. Cheeseburger? It's hot out today, huh, officer? Maybe my tail lights out.
Shouldn't you be carpooling?
I guess you're right.
I guess I am.
Carpooling can save up to 600,000 gallons of gas a year. This message sponsored by Ad Council and Earthshare.
Welcome back to the Oaklander. In recent years, we have been made all too aware of random acts of senseless violence and depravity in our modern society on television, newspapers, and magazines. Lawmakers have drafted legislation such as 3 strikes and you're in, and added severe penalties for carjackers. Yet terrible events such as the death of Toms River teacher Kathleen Weinstein still occur in spite of the threat of harsh prison sentences. Sometimes these laws also include a loss of individual freedoms, liberty, and civil rights. A New Jersey state senator has sponsored a bill to allow citizens to carry concealed weapon for self-defense. Here to clarify his views from New Jersey's 39th District, please welcome Senator Gerald Cardinale. Thank you for being our guest, Senator.
Glad to be here.
Senator Cardinale, your elected and appointed positions include former mayor of Demarest, the Board of Education president, and now Senate chairman and deputy majority leader. What prompted you to sponsor this bill to allow the citizens of New Jersey who qualify to carry a concealed weapon?
The data are compelling. If you look at the FBI reports, not the propaganda from either side of this issue, the extremists on either side of this issue, But if you look at the data from the FBI, the Department of Justice, the data are compelling. 31 states have adopted a reasonable carry permit process. Now, what do I mean by that? It's a process where after you go through all the background checks, after you prove that you're stable, your mental health is okay, you're not involved in domestic violence or DWIs or any of these other kinds of problems, you're interviewed by a police chief, and you make all of these grades. Then you take a course to learn how to use a weapon, learn safety with respect to the weapon. If you do all of these things, then it becomes reasonable that you pose no threat to your fellow citizens. Public policy shouldn't be made simply because I don't think you should do something. That's not the way we react in a free society. We react in such a way as to say, you can do anything you want to do, so long as it doesn't harm your friends, your neighbors, your fellow citizens. Now, the data from these 31 states have adopted this. I mean, this is not an outlandish, unreasonable idea. States like Pennsylvania, Connecticut have adopted this. The data from those states shows that immediately after they adopt these laws, within a year or two, crime rates plummet in those states. Now, some of the critics have said, well, yeah, crime goes down all over. Well, I don't think that you can prove that by New Jersey. Yeah, occasionally one statistic will go down, another one will go up. But when you compare these 31 states to the rest of the states, you find that crime rates in these 31 states in any given year are about 40%, 35%, 39% lower in various categories. And what is absolutely compelling about it is handgun homicides are down in states where they allow the right to carry. And this is despite the fact only about 3%. It isn't everybody goes out and gets a gun.
That's
It's
right.
about 3% of the population in these states actually goes through all the bother and all the trouble of getting a permit and actually carries a gun.
Then why have the editorials, such as in The Record and other major newspapers, responded with that same position they've held for decades, that no more guns? Do you see any reality in their arguments, or are they just playing an emotional card when it comes to self-protection?
Well, for one thing, it is an emotional reaction. They've been lied to for so long by the advocates of handgun control. Now, let me back off for just a second and say, I don't think we should have no control.
Absolutely.
I believe that we should have reasonable control, not unreasonable control. But the people who have advocated severe handgun control never give you any data. They never give you any support. They just say, oh, it's common sense. Oh, everybody knows. It's the old emperor's clothes argument. Everybody knows. All the intelligent people believe this. Well, if you want to be one of the intelligent people, I guess you got to believe that. Unless you really are intelligent. And then you start reading. And then you start looking at compilations of data that have been done by federal agencies over many years, that have been done by scholarly academics over many years. And yes, there are one or two studies that show something different than the data that I'm talking about. And I've read some of those studies. And they're very interesting. You read this so-called Maryland study. It was done in the University of Maryland. It was paid for by the federal government, paid for by CDC. And what did they do? They took Florida, where the FBI statistics clearly indicate handgun homicides had gone down 29%. And they said, oh no, it went up. Look at their methodology. They took a couple of little pieces of Florida, 3 pieces of Florida, and they studied crime in those 3 pieces of Florida. And they picked 3 places, maybe by accident, maybe by design, where crime totally had gone up. And they said if it went up in these 3 places, it must have gone up all over the state. Well, that's baloney. That's not the way you do research. Those people got paid. They are professors in a university. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. They ought to be drummed out of the academic community.
The Center for Disease Control also has a way of, when they talk about children's deaths in firearms that they actually have the age limit up to 25 years old for a child. Is that a way to actually do a study?
Well, let me tell you something about the way that the Senate, they're different as far as the way they do things is very different from the FBI. They study death certificates. They don't study criminal reports. Okay, so there's a different methodology. Now, there was an incident in Florida where a bank robber got shot by another customer in the bank who foiled the robbery. And this customer had a gun, and this robber was threatening the people in the bank and the teller. The CDC would list that as a handgun homicide if the fellow had gotten killed, if the robber had gotten killed. Now, they wouldn't make any differentiation. If a cop shot somebody, if it was a real murder, they'd lump it all together. So that as you have more and more defensive uses of firearms, CDC is going to say, oh, firearms crimes are going up. They don't say crime, but that's what people hear.
Yeah.
People hear crime. They say firearms deaths or firearms homicides. When people hear the word homicide, they think that is something bad, but homicide is any kind of killing of a human being. And it isn't necessarily bad. We have executions. We have executions in prisons. That's a homicide.
Not in the state of New Jersey.
Well, we haven't had any, but our law says we can do it, but we haven't had any. I was in the legislature when that passed, and it is certainly not a deterrent if it never happens.
Basically, all combined deaths by firearms in the, I believe it's 1994 and 1995, only equates to about 32,000 people by accident, murder, even defensive means. There are some really startling numbers on other forms of death. The American Medical Association has contributed 160,000 medical misadventures. Why is this not on the front page as, or getting as much scrutiny as your bill is?
Well, one of the statistics, I thought you were going to say this. You know, swimming pools have contributed 1.5 times as many accidental deaths as firearms. And we have many fewer swimming pools than we have households with a firearm. Fully 50% of the households in the United States have one or more firearms. Now that's an amazing number of guns out there, and the number of accidents in relation to the number of guns is really quite staggering. The chances of a fatal firearm accident are very, very, very small. There's been identified a certain personality type, though, that shouldn't have a gun, because they tend to have a lot of misadventures with guns. And if you take that particular personality type out, and there are researchers who have identified those personality traits, and you can easily put those into some of these background checks, you would have almost no fatal firearms accidents. You put good training so that people just don't leave a gun lying around. You hear these stories about kids picking up guns. Hey, you shouldn't be leaving a gun around unattended where a child can get hold of it.
Which is also a criminal offense in our state as it is.
We have so many controls. We are the stiffest controlled state with respect to firearms. You know, if you qualify to purchase a handgun, you've gone through all the background checks, you've jumped through all the hoops, you've blown all the whistles, and you're clean, and you get this little piece of paper and it says you can purchase a handgun. And now, tomorrow, you may be a collector, you may be somebody who goes target shooting, or you may be somebody who wants to keep that handgun in your home for personal defense. And all of those are permitted uses today in New Jersey within your home or within your business. And say you want to buy a second one. You know, you've got to go back and get another permit to buy the second one. You got to go through this jazz all over again. It's amazing, the hoops that we make people jump through. It's a wonder that anyone would go through all of that, but people do, because people feel threatened. You mentioned in your opening statement the teacher from Toms River.
Kathleen Weinstein.
Kathleen Weinstein. Well, Kathleen had a tape recorder in her purse. She was able to turn on that tape recorder. She was able to turn over the tape during the time she was being attacked. She was ultimately murdered. If she had a handgun, not a tape recorder, she would have had a chance to survive. I'd like to see a headline: carjacking foiled by mother with her 3 children who had a legally owned handgun, and she foiled the carjacking. I think we need headlines like that in New Jersey, and we need headlines like that to deter criminals, and it's been proven. Wright and others have done studies that have shown that criminals will not attack people they know to be armed. They will not attack people that they even suspect may be armed. Now, in New Jersey, our law has made it quite certain to criminals that their intended prey, unless they happen to pick on a police officer, their intended prey is not armed. You're a merchant in the city of Newark. You're doing retail business. You're a small businessman. You have your receipts in at the end of the day. You have to take them to a bank. They don't go into your store anymore. They don't hold up liquor stores by going in there anymore. They don't do that because the liquor store owner probably has a gun.
Yeah.
But they know when that liquor store owner goes to the bank, he or she is unarmed because that's what the law demands. So we make them vulnerable and we make them targets of criminals. Senator Lautenberg ought to be ashamed of himself.
We will continue about Senator Lautenberg's article in today's paper, but we have to take a break. We're with Senator Gerald Cardinale, and we will return this conversation after we return after this short break.
Kids, I want you to listen to this. We're going to talk about guns. Guns are not toys. So if you find a gun, leave it alone. Don't touch it. Tell an adult. A real gun is not a toy. If you find a gun, leave it alone. Don't touch it. Tell an adult. Okay, all together, one more time. If you find a gun, leave it alone. Don't touch it. Tell an adult. Got it? Good.
Welcome back to the Oaklander. We're here with the 39th District Senator Gerald Cardinale, and before we get back into this issue of great importance here, Senator, how did you get started in New Jersey politics, and how do you think this subject will have an effect with public access television?
Well, I got started in politics because of my oldest daughter. We moved from Fort Lee to Demarest, and she had started school, and she was supposed to go into first grade, and they wanted to put her into kindergarten because of a difference in the cutoff days between the two towns. And she missed by a couple of days in Demarest, and they didn't want to have any part of making any kind of waiver and so forth. And we had to really pull out all the stops to beat that bureaucracy. As my wife was leaving the last meeting, where it had all been determined before that last meeting that Marissa was going to be allowed to go into first grade where she belonged, the superintendent looked at my wife and said, "You may think you've won, but you haven't. We're going to keep our eye on her." And my wife, of course, told me about that, and I was incensed. A little while later, maybe a year or so later, somebody came knocking on the door. We only knew a few people in town when we moved there. This was one of those people. And he said, "Look, there's going to be a vacancy on the school board. Would you like to run? You have kids, they're going to be in the school, would you like to run?" I did, and one thing has led to another, and here I am.
That's wonderful. Well, we're thrilled to have you on the Oaklander and having someone with as much influence in New Jersey lawmaking as yourself to be on our show.
I don't know how much influence I have, but I certainly work at it.
Okay. Well, back to our subject at hand here. Today, which is June 18th of '96, United States Senator Lautenberg had some words to have with you with your proposed bill for concealed carry. And basically, he was saying that more guns in the private citizens will not make citizens safer. That was Jack Johnson, chairman of the New Jersey Citizens to Stop Gun Violence.
You know, if I said more guns in the streets would suddenly make everyone a millionaire, that would have about as much validity as what Mr. Johnson is saying, or what Senator Lautenberg is saying, because they present no data whatsoever to back up what they say. And if you look at the FBI reports, if you look at the Department of Justice reports, exactly the opposite is true. They haven't got an argument just with me. They have an argument with 31 state legislatures and governors who have already passed this.
But he wants
In the
to pass
United
a
States.
bill. He wants
He
to
wants
pass
to-
a
he
bill
wants to-
that would gut all of that.
He goes on to say that he really doesn't think he can do it because those 31 states send 62 senators to Congress. And it's not likely that any of those states are going to allow their senators to get away with voting against what their people, their elected representatives, and their people have demanded and have put in place, especially, you know, in none of those 31 states is there any move to repeal these laws.
Well, in the 1,000 people who now have concealed carry weapons in this state, has there ever been an incident at a traffic incident? Has there ever been someone had their permit revoked because they were abusing their privilege?
In New Jersey, none that I know of, but there are very few people in New Jersey who have carry permits.
1,000.
There are about 1,000 a year are issued, and they're good for 2 years. So you can figure that there are about 2,000 to 3,000 floating around out there, no more than 3,000. Now, take the state of Florida. The state of Florida, you have 360,000 permits have been issued since 1987. There's 360,000 good permits outstanding today in Florida. 60 have been revoked because of misuse of the weapon. That's not 60 people who have gone out and killed somebody. That may very well be somebody who forgot to fill out something on the renewal. That's an administrative regulation. They'll lose the permit for that. They may have inadvertently walked into an airport going there to pick somebody up. It's a federal offense to walk into an airport with a firearm, not just to get on a plane, but just to go in the airport.
Right.
So those kind of administrative things. But just think about it. 60 out of 360,000 have had any kind of misuse of the firearm. You know, this Maryland study I told you about a while ago was looking for just one incident out of 3 states that they could point to where a legally licensed person had misused the firearm. They couldn't find one. They couldn't find one. Firearms are misused, but they're misused by the bad guys who don't get permits in the first place.
Right.
There's plenty of guns out on the street in New Jersey. There's a lot of guns out on the street in New Jersey. But they're all in the hands of criminals because our laws have made it impossible for the honest person to get a permit. The criminal doesn't apply for a permit. He's got his gun. He doesn't care, and he knows that you haven't got one.
There is a lot of misinformation out there on this subject, and for people who care to find out some of these misinformation will be absolutely shocked. You had brought up the point about the record poll that happened with this.
Shortly after the Record did its editorial, and I will say this for the Record's editorial, they attempted to be balanced. There was 2 columns. They gave all of the data and all of the statistics that I had given them, and they must have checked on it because they published it all. And then on their second column, they said, yes, but let's forget all of that. We just don't like guns, and you shouldn't have them. And then they went on to say all kinds of things like Johnson and Lautenberg and all these other sort of fanatics, just making declarative statements that are based on nothing but hyperbole. Well, then they made a mistake. They put in this poll question because they can't believe that anybody disagrees with them. So they wanted to really nail this down. So they put in this poll question, and they even slanted the language of that question so that it would be very tough to go against them. Guess what? A week later, they published the poll results. Now, they put them on the obituary page. I have to tell you that because they didn't want anybody to see them. But I went looking for it because I knew it was going to be there. And I've got it. 950 for me, 70 for them.
Really?
950 to 70. That's one heck of an outpouring. And despite their own editorial policy against this, they published letters. And they must have searched high and low for a letter that was against me. But they only found a few, and they put those in the paper. The great majority of the letters that they have published have recited all of the same things that I've been talking about to you. Some have recited one thing, some have recited another thing, some have told about personal experiences. This is a very reasonable thing that politicians are not going to demand, but people are going to demand. Because people deserve the right to equal the balance of forces out there. A young mother in a Paramus parking lot is no match for an armed thug, even if he's only armed with a knife. But if she could carry a gun, or if he thought that she might be carrying a gun.
Or if she wanted to. Not a lot of people care to do this.
That's right. Now, very interesting comment from one of my constituents. She engaged me in a very long conversation about this. And I said, gee, you know, you just don't strike me as the kind of person that I would have thought would go out and take the courses and buy a gun and carry a gun and so forth. She said, oh, no. She said, I wouldn't do that. I said, well, then why are you so interested in this law? She said, if the criminal knew that I could have done that, and I just put a sticker on my car saying I'm a member of a gun club, he'd leave me alone. That's what the experience is in other states. Very few people actually get the guns, but the criminals, out of uncertainty, leave people alone. In Florida, everybody's heard this, but they haven't heard it in exactly this context. Criminals took off for a very long period of time against tourists, and they identified the tourists because they had a special designated license plate on rental cars. So the criminals started carjacking tourists who had this particular kind of license plate.
They had cash with them, and they knew that they would not be carrying.
And they knew that they couldn't carry a gun because they didn't live there in Florida. They had to come in on a plane, and you couldn't carry a gun on a plane. They started attacking people around airports because they knew that there was a high likelihood that those people could not be carrying because they were going to or from the airport. Well, they had to change. The state of Florida had to change their license plate system so that they no longer identified with a distinctive license plate the rental cars. Now, the rental cars are different. When Maryland did that study, they picked a number of locations in Florida that were right near airports because they knew that that would be a high crime area by comparison with the rest of the state.
How has some of your colleagues of Senator Adler and Cody, they believe that the solution to violence is to ban all sales, possession, and transfer of handguns. What do you think the reason is for their stance on this issue?
Well, just take a look at their stance. It's crazy. We have banned the sale, the possession, the transfer of heroin. You want to tell me that in Cody's district there's no heroin? Come on. I'll tell you, you know, that the ocean is green, and you'll know that it's true. In Adler's district, well, he represents Camden County. How much crime is there down there? I think the reason you have so much crime is because they elect officials like this, who have no common sense. I took Adler aside. I'll tell you about Adler. He made some of these statements in the press. I took him aside. He came into my office and he spent an hour with me. And he looked at all of this data. And I said, now, has your mind changed? He said, certainly. You have given me a great deal of uncertainty about my position. That's what he said. You've
Really?
given me a great deal of uncertainty about my position. He said, these facts seem to be compelling. But he's not going to change his public stance.
Right.
Because it's politics. It's politics. they can demagogue this issue, most people will never get the information unless there are lots of programs like yours. And I'm doing a lot of them, and I hope some other people will do them as well, so that these facts can get out to the general public. And you know, it's amazing how people think about this. I was at a Republican gathering, and this newly elected councilman was there, and I was introduced to him, and somebody mentioned this handgun thing, and he said, "Oh no, I don't want any more assault weapons." I said, "What are you talking about? This bill has nothing to do with assault weapons." He said, "Oh, I thought that this was something to do with assault weapons." And I said, "No, it has nothing to do." But this is how he was listening, but he was hearing something different. It's because he was listening with half an ear, and he was hearing something different. People need to know that this has nothing to do with buying guns and having them in your home. It has nothing to do with keeping them in your place of business. It has nothing to do with any machine guns or anything like that. This has to do with handguns and with people who have passed a background check having the ability, after they've purchased it, and they've passed all that, to carry it with them when they go into a dangerous neighborhood. It has to do with judges. I've talked to Superior Court judges. They have strict orders from the Supreme Court of the state of New Jersey that they are not to issue. If you went in, and I don't think you're a threat, if I went in, and I'm not a threat, I know I'm not a threat to my fellow citizens, I couldn't get a handgun carry permit. I could get a permit to buy one,
Right.
keep it in my home. It'd take about 5 months, but I could get it. But I would not be allowed to carry it. Now, I don't pose a threat. My wife doesn't pose a threat. But the criminal out there poses a threat to my wife, poses a threat to you, poses a threat to me, poses a threat to the most vulnerable people in our society. And why should that criminal continue to have this advantage? Shouldn't we allow our vulnerable population to have something to balance the scales, even if it's only the threat that they might be carrying a handgun, even if they aren't? I think they deserve that.
Well, I think this is at least one side of the issue. I know that there's more that we can do to help people, whether it's jobs and education. It's not just one thing on that. We have to try to find equitable ways to raise our family of man to respect each other.
That's exactly right, and what you will find is that in the gun club societies, for instance, where they have this sort of mystique about guns, and a lot of other people sort of look askance at that. I don't belong to any of those clubs, but once in a while I will be invited to go to a dinner at one of these facilities. There's one in Tenafly, and I've been invited there several times. Or I'll be invited to something where several of those people, and I've gotten to know who some of them are gathered. They're very respectful people. They're not your neighborhood tough. I was talking to a police chief, and he got into the newspapers, and I said, "Joe, why do you think that? Do you have some data? Are there some studies? Is there something I ought to know about? Because I'm serious about this. I'm not just trying to get news headlines and so forth. I'd hardly want to get news headlines on this subject, believe me. But he said, well, I used to be a chief in a different town, and we had parking lots, and people would get into fights, fist fights, over parking spaces. And if they had guns, they'd all be blowing one another's head off. And I said, well, Joe, have you gone to some of the other states where they have this law? Have you gone to Connecticut? Connecticut's got this law. They have parking lots, they have supermarkets and so forth, and they have people. Is that happening? And he was quiet. I said, have you gone to Pennsylvania? Have you talked to any of the police chiefs there? Is that happening in Pennsylvania? And he was quiet. I said, you know why it doesn't happen? Because that neighborhood tough who is liable to get into a fist fight over a parking space is a hothead. He's been a hothead his whole life. And he's going to have a record. And these background checks are going to screen him out. And he said, you know, you might be right. Never thought of that. We got to think of these things.
Well, I hope we all do a lot more thinking, and I think we'll be a better society if we manage to do that. Senator Gerald Cardinale, thank you for being our guest on the Oaklander tonight and answering some of the questions surrounding the matter of civil rights involving self-protection. Senator Cardinale is from the 39th District, and if you have a comment on this issue, you can reply to the Oaklander, and we will forward them to Senator Cardinale's office. Again, thank you, and we will return after this short break.
Hello, I'm Isabel Schuss. Today we're at the Alps Manor in Wayne, and we'll be speaking with one of its residents, former Oakland Mayor Joseph Van Boren. Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's
Pleasure
great to
be
see you.
here.
Good. The reason why we're here today is you were a former Oakland mayor, and we wanted to talk about how Oakland was back in the 50s and 60s when you were living there.
Yes.
Now, I found some information that you were the mayor back in 62 and 63, and we want to talk about some of your accomplishments while you were mayor back then.
Okay.
Why don't you give us an idea of what you did?
Well, the big thing that what I'm most proud of is putting in the industrial park.
Great. How did that come about?
Well, there was a tract of land in Oakland that was owned by a man who was a farmer on it, and he wanted to sell it. And the tract of land was flat, ideal for developing. So I talked to him one day, and he said, yeah, he wants to sell it. So I said, doesn't matter who you sell it to. He said, no, just as long as I get my price. So I contacted the developers of Fairlawn Industrial Park, the McBride family. I had been close friends with all the McBrides. Went to school with Joe McBride. Evans was a good friend. And told him about the tract of land, and he was interested in. And that's how it all got started.
Great. That was great. How long? Do you remember how long it took to actually build and get it functioning?
Wasn't even a year.
Wow, that's great. That's even better than the standards today that we get to do things.
Yeah. He had customers always waiting to get it to a nice industrial park. And Whitco Chemical happened to be one, and I have friends that work for Whitco. We went over to New York. We saw Whitco, and they agreed to be the first customer.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Now, I also remember you had mentioned to me when we were speaking before that you also had a business in Oakland. Can you tell me a little about that?
Yeah. I owned a sport shop, cycle shop. I always was interested in sports, and there was a sport shop in Bumpton Lakes that was going out of business, and I bought the man's business and moved it to Oakland.
Oh, lucky for us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to really know a lot of people from having your business in town?
Yeah, right.
So did you have the business prior to being the mayor? Is that how?
No,
That came afterwards?
that came afterward. I had always been interested in something like this, and this opportunity came just at that time.
Great. And whereabouts, was it on the main street in Oakland?
Right on the main street next to the Oakland Wine and Liquor,
Oh. That's,
you know.
Yeah,
right,
actually it's
right
still
across
there.
from the parking lot.
Oh. Yeah, well, that's still there.
Yeah.
Not a lot of things are there. I mean, no, Oakland's built up since you
Yeah.
were a resident there as well. We have lots of traffic, but it's still a really great place to live.
I think it's a wonderful town.
Yeah, I know you had mentioned to me, somebody had said to you that you could take the,
You can take Joe out of Oakland, but you never take Oakland out of Joe.
well, that's really nice to
My
hear.
wife said that all the time.
Aw, that's great. Well, I also wanted to mention some of your background. You said that you were in the military. Why don't you give us some information regarding that?
I was a Marine Corps pilot in World War II in Korea. And I got fortunate enough to get the rank of colonel.
Colonel, wow, that's pretty impressive,
I
Joe.
stayed with it and got promoted to colonel.
And where did you serve actually, Joe?
In the Pacific, in Korea.
So both, you were in
Both.
World War II and then into
Korea,
Korea.
right.
I guess you had come home and then were
They had to Yeah, I
recalled?
I was in the active reserve, and they recalled.
Oh, so you do have a good military background, I take it, huh?
Yeah, I'm kind of proud of that.
I understand. You used to fly planes, is that what you said?
Right,
You were
I was a fighter pilot.
fighter pilot. So what kind of planes did you fly? Do you?
No, F-6F, F-4Fs, and dive bombers.
Oh, you were a dangerous guy, huh, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked the dive bombing because it was very safe, very effective, and it really did a good job.
It got the job done, is
Yeah.
that it? Well, it looks like you used to get the job done too. I mean, getting that industrial park in there. Did you enjoy being in politics back then in the 60s, or?
It was okay. The only thing used to get me, if some people don't agree with you, they hate you. And you try to do the best you can, not aggravate anybody any more than you have to.
Right. So I guess you made some friends and not so many, and some friends that weren't always there for the
Yeah,
decisions
right.
that you made in town, huh?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you did a great service by bringing the industrial park in. I mean, that must have helped with the local taxes. Is that
Oh,
one of
yeah.
the reasons?
It was great for taxes, and the tax collector, he kept tabs on it, and he kept telling me, well, we got this done, and we got that done, and we didn't increase tax, so it was good.
That was good. So that's something. I also remember you telling me you lived right on the main road when you were in Oakland. right?
560 Ramapo Valley Road.
Well, we would have been neighbors because I'm at 526.
Yeah.
So it's a really a beautiful stretch of land.
Yes, it is.
Through the Ramapos and
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I built the house there. And I enjoyed the house.
Yeah, it was great. I see. I'm looking at my notes. Pardon me.
Okay.
You used to work in sales also for a Patterson Supply and Engineering, and
Right.
how long were you with them?
Oh, about 4 or 5 years.
And that was also prior to being mayor, or?
Yes.
Right. So you acted as mayor what, after you retired from your business life,
Yeah.
or?
No, I kept the sports shop when I was there.
Oh, great. Oh, that was good. So I see a flag sitting here on the table, Joe. Why don't you give us an idea? What do you usually do? It's raining today, I'd like to tell our viewers, so
Well,
we
my
aren't
job-
outside.
I have a job putting the flag up every day and taking it down.
I'm taking it down.
I enjoy that.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I wanted to thank you for being our guest today. You're a great guest.
Thank you.
And, you know, hopefully we'll be able to come back and visit with you again maybe another
Please
time.
do it
That'd
anytime.
be great.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, you
Thank
stay
you.
seated here, and I'm going to say goodbye to my audience, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Well, that was a little talk with former Mayor Joseph Van Voren, and I'd like to thank the administration here at the Alps Manor. That will be Robin Marr and Charlotte Peretti. Is that correct? And we want to thank them for letting us use their facility here. Thanks, Joe. And back to you, Al.
Well, that's our show for July 1996. We hope to see a great turnout for our Ramapo Mountain Folk Festival, August 18th. Our thanks to our guests, George Gurney and Senator Gerald Cardinale, for taking the time to talk to us on the concealed carry laws. This is a civil rights issue that deserves consideration. For more information, you can read the Federalist Papers by James Madison, John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton, available at the Oakland Public Library. Thanks to the Oaklander remote team for bringing us a closer look at the people in our area who are committed to making a positive difference in our community. And thank you for watching the Oaklander. Until next time, I'm your host, Al DiGiacomo, and happy birthday to the Republic. It's 220 years old.
Your baby came back, give her your name. You know it's hard to forget all the pain. Try a new style, get a new friend. 'Cause now she's waiting for you, and you don't know what to do. I believe in my love, I believe